The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Loudon Swain.
Brett Metcalf, Tony Ramos,
Ryan Shute,
Mike Golick,
Bubba J,
Johnny Hendricks, Matthew Modine,
the one and only Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to the one and only Short Time Wrestling Podcast by the often imitated and never duplicated Jason Bryant.
I'm three-time national wrestling writer and broadcaster of the year, Jason Bryant, and I'll bring you news, reviews, previews, and interviews with the most notable names and personalities in wrestling. Subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app by logging on to matttalkonline.com/listen and leave a review for the show at matttalkonline.com/getshorttime. Short Time is sponsored by Flips Wrestling. Share your attitude and be heard at flipswrestling.com. Now it's time, because you've always got time, for Short Time. Hey folks, Short Time Wrestling Podcast, episode 182. Jason Bryant here with you, getting ready for the weekend, and I guess it's going to be a good weekend. How do you top the 4th of July? I mean, we had the lake, we had cookouts, we had all sorts of stuff, but I guess this is the buffer week before Fargo starts. Hashtag Fargo 2015. Junior Nationals coming up in Fargo, kicking off on July 18th. Today we'll be talking with Mike Malinconico, a club coach out of New Jersey, and his Rhino Wrestling Club. Find out more about them at rhinowrestlingclub.com and at Rhino Wrestling on Twitter. We'll be talking about his club, basically his theories on things and practice and training, strength training and whatnot. But he's also been featured on Vice Sports, which is a sports journalism website that takes things a little differently. It gives you a little bit more of an introspective in things. And before we get to that, another batch of reviews came in this week on iTunes. So let's give credit before we get going. This show has one sponsor, and that's Flips Wrestling. So if you're interested in contributing to this show or helping me crowdfund the campaign that I'm kicking off with the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Legends Series, you can go to matttalkonline.com/contribute. Let me channel my inner NPR voice here at PBS. It's viewers like you that make this all possible. Thank you for listening to this show. It is not all things considered. This show is sponsored by Flips Wrestling. Yeah, anyway, it's viewers like you or listeners like you, Flips Wrestling, and of course, the fact my wife lets me work from home, that all this is possible. Now let's talk to the reviews. We'll talk about the reviews, rather. New Minot State assistant coach Jake Kettler, most recently from George Mason. He rates it 5 stars. And he's probably somewhere between Virginia and the oil fields while he listens to this and while you listen to this. Hey, Jake, you might have a bad mustache, but I do appreciate you listening. Just don't tell your friends at George Mason that you were complimentary of anything an Old Dominion grad did. That won't fly too well in Fairfax. Anyway, thanks, Jake, for the 5-star review. I guess he's going to be driving through his old neck of the woods of Anoka, Minnesota here, probably on his way to Minot. Cradle King and Dungeon WC, I assume that's Dungeon Wrestling Club, both hit the show up with a 5-star review. Big thanks there. Hey, guys, shoot me an email to jason@bryantwrestling.com with some contact information. And yes, that even means you too, Kettler, and your hideously awful, terrible mustache. I guess you've already left the review, so I guess I can insult you all I want, right, Jake? No, all in good fun, Eric VA5 also chimed in. Appreciate the kind words. And Jake Oster, yes, the Division III champ from Elmhurst, with a 5-star plug. Hey, Jake, check this out. Newest show on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. It's all about Division III wrestling. It's called the Ice Hour, named for the late TC&J coach Dave Eisenhower. You can find that on matttalkonline.com/ice or go directly to the iTunes subscription page at matttalkonline.com/D3. If you're out there and you want a little shout out, drop a review at matttalkonline.com/getshorttime. And if you hit the right level of patronage on the contribution page I mentioned a second ago, you can be a co-host on Short Time. So I know Matt Greenberg has been out there he's been pestering me on Twitter to try to get him on the show. You know what, Matt, that's going to happen. I said I'd do it. But those of you out there that might want to come on and jump on as a co-host, you can contribute to the page by going to matttalkonline.com/contribute. Also of note on the network, Richard Emmels, USA Wrestling Podcast, bonus points really taken off. He had Jake Herbert on the second episode. Check that one out. And you can subscribe via iTunes directly at mattalkonline.com/bonus points. Go to thematt.com to listen to that. Or you can also, again, subscribe. Or you can go to mattalkonline.com/BP2 to go right to that episode. A couple of you fans might be into this. A couple of you might not be, because I know the world of pro wrestling and amateur wrestling aren't supposed to get along. But guess what? It happens. People like stuff like that. You know what? So, especially with the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum actually has a professional wrestling wing, and in that wing you'll actually see a lot of these old professional wrestlers that had amateur wrestling backgrounds. One of those was Jerry Briscoe. He was recently on Kyle Klingman's On the Mat program, also available on the Mat Talk Podcast Network. And this weekend down in Waterloo is the George Tragos Lou Thez Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame weekend. That's down in Waterloo, so check that out. Now, we're going to talk to Mike Malinconico about his club, the lock-ins, and just a warning, folks, this guy's pretty unfiltered. So if you don't like a particular word that shares a synonymous meaning with feces, you might not care for it. So just giving you a little, it's not a parental advisory warning by any means, but this show will have the explicit tag just because it's not like explicit, but it's like, words you can't say until you're like at least 16. Depending on your upbringing, I guess. But if you're a wrestling fan or if you've been a wrestler, you've probably heard the word before. But that's just your little warning. So don't be surprised when you hear a profanity on today's show. But anyway, that might be just his jersey coming out. No offense to everybody from Jersey, because not everybody from Jersey curses. But Mike Malinconico, interesting take on things here on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Let's do it. And now our conversation today is going to be with a gentleman who has kind of piqued my interest over the past year or so. His name is Mike Malinconico out of New Jersey. And let me tell you a little backstory on how I discovered this. As most of you know, you're listening to a podcast right now. So I listen to podcasts about podcasts. I listen to podcasts about wrestling. I have a directory where you can listen to podcasts about wrestling at mattalkonline.com/directory. And if you scroll down, there's a title called Wrestling Life, and that's Mike's podcast. And last year, I stumbled across this thing, and I start listening, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? What? Sir, you said that? Oh, man, it was like something that I think all wrestling coaches want to say sometimes. And even some people, like, there's some things that you said, it's like, man, if I wasn't in the media, this is some things that I might say sometimes. You're a little, for those wondering, it's not safe for work all the time. But, Mike,
no, in fact, I don't want it to be safe for work, because I think we should stop doing that work stuff altogether. No, don't listen to this out loud at work. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it was interesting because you had Joe Dubuque could come in your practice, and you had some other people, and you were talking wrestling. There's like Chris Orcheski. I was like, man, I remember that guy. And it's like I'm listening to these names, and I'm like, and the way you guys are talking about coaching, and you're talking about the high school team, the club team, and I was like, and I just kept listening. And then you had a new season. You had Coleman Scott on. I'm just like, man, I got to talk to this guy. And then it all comes to a head last week when you were featured on Vice Sports, which, for those who don't know, Vice Sports is kind of, it's a newer website, but it says Vice Sports, according to their website, chronicles sports and the role of sports in society, publishing original, reported, and research stories, as well as videos that take you inside the lives of athletes on and off the field. Now, the title of this story on Vice Sports, which you can go read, I've created a short link for it. If you go to mattalkonline.com/rhino, that's RHINO, in case you were wondering how to spell rhino. It's called Self-Discovery While Locked in a Room with Sweaty Wrestlers and Shirtless Children. Now, right away, that title seems a little clickbaitish, but...
Can I pause you there, though, man?
Sure thing.
Here's the truth. I was really nervous about how I would be portrayed in that article, man. I was really scared because, Aaron and I had, the guy that wrote the article, his name is Aaron Gordon, sweetheart of a guy, one of the nicest guys I've run into outside of wrestling. And he was uncomfortable during that lock-in, man. And I was petrified that he was going to paint me in a dictator's light. And I was scared, dude. So when it finally did come out, what was it, Friday or something? I don't even know, Thursday or Friday. When it finally did come out, man, I literally had driven all night to work a camp in Podunk, South Carolina somewhere. And as I'm getting out of the car, about to lace up my shoes, have been in the car for 10 hours, I turn my phone back on for a second, and I go, oh, my goodness. He wrote the article. So he sent me the link. So, it did come out all right. But, man, I got to tell you, I was really nervous to read that article.
Well, as I was reading it, again, this is a situation where a lot of these sports sites, the Deadspins and even Bleacher Report's starting to become actually more legitimate. I used to hate Bleacher Report when it first came out. Now they've got real writers. And I'm sitting there, I'm reading this, and I'm like, it was the way it was written, it was real. And that was the one thing. Yeah, there's F-bombs in there. There's what it is. But I think let's not sugarcoat the world of wrestling for a moment.
Right.
When I was in high school, my PE teacher, my senior year, I was wrestling, and my coach Billy Ruff, I had him for senior gym, and the way your gym teacher is in the first hour, and if he's also the wrestling coach, they're night and day. So as soon as I stepped into that wrestling room, Coach Ruff stopped being nice, and I learned real quickly that if you're in a sport like wrestling, you're going to have to get tough. And, you get thrown into a wall a couple times. You get beaten up pretty much daily. The language is less of the problem. It's more about survival at that point. And there's one thing about Mike, folks. This guy's real. And you might want to say it's a little bit of Jersey. We can talk about that a little bit. But before we get into this lock-in story, which was on, again, you can check it out on Vice Sports. And I've created a quick link for you at matttalkonline.com/Rhino. And Mike is heading up the Rhino Wrestling Club in New Jersey. And let's just go back in time, Mike. Talk a little bit about your wrestling career from Edison out of New Jersey. You had a couple ways into college wrestling, Oklahoma State, a junior college, before you ended up at Syracuse. And first of all, what was it about wrestling for you that drew you into the sport initially?
I think what happened initially rather, is I came to it. Now, remember back in the early 90s and late 80s, it wasn't as big in the state of New Jersey as it is now. I think the advent of wrestling clubs coming from the state of New Jersey pretty much is what really propelled us forward to the national prominence. But, man, most kids growing up in Jersey played baseball. Most kids growing up in Jersey at that time, or at least in the area of Jersey that I was in, they were playing baseball, they were playing football, they were playing soccer. So when a couple of my buddies from elementary schools said they were going to wrestle, I really did assume that it was going to be like the WWF, And I got there and I asked my dad where the ropes were, and so I don't know, man. I got into it just like most other kids. Their buddies kind of dragged them into it. And what made me excel and fall in love with it was your ability to control your own destiny, probably more so in the sport of wrestling than any other sport. I mean, you'd agree with that, right? I mean, most other sports, there's a physical limitation on it, meaning if you're not talented, there's only so far you can go, But in wrestling, it seems to be that ceiling seems to be a lot higher, through hard work and through dedication and through things like that. I think we bust through that pretty easily in wrestling,
It's kind of like that saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I guess that's something wrestling's kind of embraced over the years.
Sure, and it becomes our mantra. I mean, as a sport, we kind of hang our hat on the fact that we are the absolute hardest working sport that there is, and because of that, I think what happens is it gets passed down, right? It gets passed down to kids that we can say to kids now. We can say, look, man, you might not be able to throw a football 40 yards, and you might not be able to run a 4.40, but you can come to this sport and you can have a home, even if you're tall and lanky, even if you're short and squatty, even if you're, whatever body type, whatever personality you are, you can find a home in this sport, And I think that's really what I loved about it at first,
Yeah, you can not be a good athlete and be a good wrestler, even though you have to develop those athletic things. This is kind of something that you've been doing with some of these lock-ins. We'll talk about the lock-in here in a bit because, again, that was kind of the focus of the Vice Sports article. But, you know, when you get into coaching and, you know, at first glance, when you see a picture of you or you see you on video and you've actually been really cool with the whole Periscope thing, for those that don't know, the streaming from your phone, and I'd see it on my Twitter, you know, going live on Periscope, so I'll watch, and then it's this dungeon type of wrestling room, and
That's
you know,
right.
you know, you're telling kids, you know, barking things at the kids. Some of them look like they were beginners, just getting their feet wet with it, looking for a little extra one-on-one time, and then you get into that intense coach level with some of the other kids. I'm like, man, Mike doesn't mess around with this stuff. So
No, look, man, I try and be as blunt and honest with my athletes, and truthfully, you know, I try to be as blunt and honest with people in general as I can. You know, so yeah, there's a modicum of a lack of tact sometimes with the way that I speak, but. You know, to me, it's the quickest way to results. You know, I mean, what are we here for? We're here to, you know, to make young men. You know, I mean, that's really what we're here for. I'm here, my job is to make great young men and collect Olympic titles along the way. You know, and if Olympic titles happen to be a byproduct, well, then I'm very happy about that, you know. But we're first and foremost here to make young men, and I think the best way to do that is to not, you know, fluff around with the language that we use with them. You know, be as direct and as assertive with your choice of words as you possibly can. You know.
Well, and it's not just being ruthless too, because people say, you know, there is an element that you have to bring people on. You know, you build them up, you break them down, you build them up again. You're not coddling people, but at the same point, there is when you're hard on somebody, there is that inner voice that you have to pick them up and be like, hey, you know, some people could call it coddling. What do you call it when you have to bring an athlete back that's hit the wall in the practice room?
Jay, you know, truthfully, I'm being honest. If I that's the beauty of being brutally honest. Okay, they know that when I'm just as an example, I'm actually in between sessions right now, so I'm speaking to you. I'm still sweating as I'm speaking to you.
I can smell it through the phone. Yeah,
you should, dude, because it smells like a baboon's ass in here. It's awful. All right, but you know, I literally the conversations that are had in between reps. Okay, are quite simple. Here's what you did real well about that last rep. Here's what you sucked at, and here is what we are going to do to make everything better. Okay, so it's a positivity or it's a negativity sandwich, right? Like, I mean, you get the two pieces of bread are the positivity, the meat's the negativity, and it's kind of cradled in there so that you know. But they know that I truly mean what I'm saying when I say, hey, look, you did this part of the technique really, really well. You really sucked at this part, so here's how we're going to get better doing it. So I think, you know, again, it's not a always brutal thing, but if it were, and then you get that one compliment, you know that compliment is genuine. You know that the feeling or the emotion that's being conveyed at that point is a genuine one. I'm really proud of the fact that you did that well, you know, X, Y, or Z, you know?
Yeah, and we see with these different teaching techniques, obviously some of them come from other clubs, and you talked about the club system in New Jersey, and we had about a year ago I talked to Ed Piccola, who did some private training. So I think it's this time of the year where I talked to somebody from Jersey doing private training or clubs. Yeah. But, you know, looking back at some of those clubs that, you know, obviously people know the names like the Edge and whatnot, where did you first get the idea to launch Rhino Wrestling Club, and what is its basically its start and its genesis?
It was completely on accident, dude. It was completely on accident. Kid that wrestled for Rutgers a couple years back, his name is Scott Winston. I grew up training him. So when I came home from Syracuse in 2001 or 2002, I was coaching with like a rec team, like and Scott, and there was a good handful of athletes in that team, and Scott moved from one part of the state to the next, and when he did, I actually happened to live closer to where he was moving to. So his dad said to me, "Hey, look, man, would you mind continuing to train Scotty?" And I said, "Sure." And then he goes, "Well, how are we going to deal with mats?" And I said, "Well, we'll figure that stuff out." I had a bunch of mats in my dad's garage, like not even laid out. Like I wasn't living at my dad's house. They were just rolled up mats in my dad's garage, And he went to the church. The Winstons went to this church in Freehold, New Jersey called Abundant Life Church of God. And the pastor at the church had two kids that wrestled as well. You might know their names, Tyler and Chris Fraley. Tyler won 5 national titles. So out of that room, so it was Dallas Winston, Scott Winston, Christopher Fraley, and Tyler Fraley. And out of that room of 4 kids that we started training with, there were 7 national titles. So, and they're high school and junior national titles, but still national titles nonetheless. And what happened was with those 4 kids, I turned around one week and there was like 6 kids there. And then I turned around a week later and there was 12 kids there. And then I turned around a week later and there's 30 kids and you can't even get on the mats, So I kind of looked up at that point and I had a sales job, and it was, I'll never forget, it was about 10 days or almost 2 weeks before I was going to Las Vegas to get married to my wonderful wife. And I told her that I was quitting my $45,000 a year sales job and I was going to wrestle full time. And to say that she was unhappy would be a pretty big understatement. So, I kind of basically haven't looked back since. We've grown to 4 locations across the country now. We have 3 in the state of New Jersey. Ed Picola is heading up one of them. Our newest location is in Manalapan, New Jersey. We have one in Flemington that Kyle Brewer's running, and then Tony Forte, your boy from ODU, is running it down here in South Carolina, man. So, we just basically we've kind of gone through a full metamorphosis as a club. We've tried some things that did work, and we've tried some things through trial and error that did not work, and we're kind of making our way through this thing a little bit differently than most folks on the club level, I think. Because we're trying our best to have coaches meetings. We're doing these types of Google Hangouts where each workout on Monday nights is broadcast to the other 3 locations. So basically, I'll do Google Hangouts and I'll be teaching one Monday night, and all 4 locations are doing the same thing. You know what I mean? So we're trying to push the envelope as far as technology goes, while still giving it, like you said, that dungeony feel. Because, let's be honest, man. I rooted for Mr. T in Rocky 3. I didn't root for Rocky Balboa,
Although let's be honest, Mickey's Gym, man, that was dungeon-esque.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when Rocky got away from it, he started getting soft, man. So I was definitely rooting for Clubber Lang,
You bring up Tony Forte, just a little factoid, because everybody automatically thinks that if anybody's got a tie to Old Dominion, I automatically know them. But Tony was out of ODU before I came in, so he was out. His senior year would have been my senior year in high school. Now, he did show up periodically throughout the course of my freshman, sophomore year. You know how wrestlers are. We'd be a little social. I remember sitting down in a chair one time, and he walks in the wrestling house. He thought I was the other heavyweight that had since failed out. He thought I was somebody else. I'm like, nah, dude, I'm somebody else. He goes, oh, yeah. I was like, okay, yeah. So it's funny. The extent of our relationship in terms of wrestling is basically just chatting on Facebook here and there. So it's just funny. So, it's funny now. My buddy Charlie Bush, who wrestled when I was in college at ODU, people will, he says he'll go to nationals now and be like, oh, wow, you wrestled Old Dominion. That's not the response we got 10 years ago, man, or before Steve, in Gray Simon's last couple years.
Hey, what do you attribute that to? Like, why now? Why now more so than before?
You put a guy in the national finals, people tend to realize that your school does have a wrestling program, because this is something that Steve Martin and you know, I know you fired some jokes at Steve over the years, and I think we all do. But you know, it's funny because before then, I mean, the previous national finalist was Jody Staler, and that was basically, okay, yeah, he transferred from Carolina. Then Ryan Williams makes the finals. People are like, holy crap.
Yeah.
You know, this kid was 7th in the state of PA his junior year and then makes the NCAA finals. So, you know, it's funny how it takes a couple All-Americans to, and then there's people in the stands. I remember going in 2003 in Kansas City as I was a student writer for ODU, and I had my little Matt Talk online before it was what it is now. And we didn't qualify anybody, and I had a press credential for the ODU student paper. I thought that was a little ironic, but you know, you talk about forte. So I just wanted to clear that out a little bit. So Tony, little Monarch things, because when we go back to campus now, you'll look at it and be like, wow, this is different. But we're getting kind of off the topic here a little bit. But hey, you know, that's what we expected, folks. I'm not mapping this interview out with Mike, because if you have had the opportunity to listen to Wrestling Life, nothing's scripted. So
there ain't no script involved, man.
I'm just trying to keep
half of those words down. That's for sure.
Yeah, and like we were saying before we started, I'd like to equate Mike as you know, we're doing this interview the way he does his show and some of his practices. It's not formal, but it does have a sense of formal. So you're like the tuxedo T-shirt of wrestling.
That's it, man. I'll take it. I like it.
I mean, complete with the beard, the massive beard, which is looking pretty good, and the tattoos, of course.
Yeah, I get some looks down, especially down here. You know, I guess living on the Jersey Shore, the tattoos are kind of par for the course. But down here in South Carolina, I'm down here for a better part of 2 weeks. You know, training camps and stuff. We got Profaci down here training for Fargo, and you know, we got some guys training for the senior level stuff. But yeah, I get some looks down here. That's for sure. The full sleeve of tattoos and a big old beard. Yeah, I look a little different than people down here. That's for sure.
Well, you know, remember down there they do have that. You know, people up in Jersey always want to point to the Jersey Shore. Down there they got that show called Party Down South. So,
really?
Yeah, you know, if you want to know what it is, watch The Soup. They have outtakes from that thing all the time. It's like a Jersey Shore in South Carolina or Georgia, wherever it is. I don't want to insult people from South Carolina if it's not there. But,
they don't pick there.
Yeah, but now it's talking about the club thing. Here's another thing. We bring up the appearances and the name recognition. A lot of people look at like, oh, okay, you know, so-and-so's got this killer club here. He's a name. You know, obviously people know your name in Jersey, but, you know, how do you get that? You know, you don't have the name recognition to run such a killer club. How do you get past that? I mean, what did you do to basically say, I'm just a guy coaching here. I'm going to make your kids better. I mean, was it a sell to the kids, or was it just that first group that said, you know, the Scott Winstons of the world that like took a chance on a guy a lot of people hadn't heard of, and then boom?
I don't think so, man. I am not preaching. First of all, you know, what I'm selling at a wrestling club level is nothing more or less than a lifestyle. You know, without putting on my philosopher's hat too much, you know, I think what's going on, not just in our sport, but in our culture in America, is we're getting too caught up with the way things look as opposed to the way things are. And that's why I get, you know, I get shit for cursing on my podcasts. I get shit for, you know, whatever. For cursing in my blog or cursing during practices. People don't want to hear the truth, I think, you know, and the truth is that wrestling coaches talk like that. Okay. Wrestling coaches drop F-bombs. Wrestling coaches do that. Okay. So I think if we're all going to be honest with one another, whether I was a great wrestler in high school or in college or not, doesn't matter, because the truth is, if you throw yourself into this sport, I mean headlong into this sport, anybody can be a great coach. It takes a full-time commitment. And that's why you're seeing the coaches and the clubs that are having more success than others now in the year 2015. If you can pick them out, you'll find that most of those coaches are full-time coaches now. Okay, they have found now. We as wrestling coaches, as club coaches across the country, need to find a way for it to be a much more desirable job than it is right now monetarily, but it can be done, you know. And I think the fact that I didn't, All-American, or the fact that I was never a world team member, the fact that I wasn't even that good in high school. You know, I one-time finalist in high school. I was average on a good day. You know, if we're all going to be honest, I think what happens is the fact that I didn't do all those things is what has driven me in this coaching endeavor. You know, I watch more tape than anyone I've ever heard of. I mean, I do. I watch. My wife knows who Dennis Sargouche is. Like she at 4:00 in the morning will roll over and go, "Oh, you're watching Sargouche again, huh?" I'm like, "Yeah." You know, so I think it's just, you know, the same way we talked about talent only taking you so far in this sport. Well, I think the same thing applies for coaching. If you just put the hours in, if you just kind of throw yourself into this sport and you really have a passion for conveying the message of this sport to other people, then man, oh man, you're going to be a successful coach. I'd pay money to hear you speak. So, I don't really care about what credentials I've had or any other club coach has for that instance. You know, I want to see guys that are into what they're doing right now, not into what they did on the mat 10 years ago. What are you into doing right now? Are you staying current with the sport? Are you conveying good messages to young men? Are you living? Are you doing workouts with them to let them know that you know how it feels to do this? You know, can I do every single workout with these kids anymore? No. Like you said, I'm in my late 60s now. It's hard for me to do that. But man, you have to be somewhat present. You know, you have to be present. So I don't know, man. I want everyone to realize that you can make a living doing this sport. Anyone can. You just gotta kind of stick to it a little bit more than other professions.
And in case you didn't understand that, folks, that was dripping with sarcasm about his age. Mike's 37. He's 64 in wrestling years, because that's what wrestling will do to your body. Thankfully, I stopped competing long ago before my knees and shoulders are creaky for other reasons, because I keep lifting up a 3-year-old all the time now. And I don't quite have the dexterity I once did. Maybe if I wrestled longer, I could have that, but I'd probably have another problem. My nose might be dispositioned a couple different places. But now, one thing that always strikes me, and I think New Jersey is kind of the hub for this, is the clubs. And then I talked to David McFadden last week on my Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling show, and he didn't do very much club stuff. He said he went in and work out here and there, but he said everything he got was from the Boundbrook Wrestling Room and the coaches that he got there. And there obviously there's nothing wrong with not going with a club or going with a club, but now, and you're seeing it, like I said, in Jersey, a lot of private training clubs, a lot of things, and there's this portion. I guess this goes with anything. I guess this is why people will, they get on Intermat, they get on Flow, and they complain about paying for something in the sport of wrestling. Do you find that when you first started, people are like, man, why do we got to pay for this? Or, you should be giving this away for free. I mean, it's like, it seems like there's this underbelly of maybe it's old timiness. Oh no, it's a problem, man. It's a cancer in our sport. Our sport is so accessible. The highest levels of our sport, the men, the greatest athletes in our sport are so accessible. And the fact that they don't make a quarter of what some of these baseball, football players can make outside of their playing career is shameful. It's shameful. It's absolutely deplorable, because we are the hardest working sport in the world, and we know that. Okay, the problem is that our culture has given it away for free for so long that it is really hard to go against that. When Ernie Monaco started charging $1,200 a year, people, they lost their shit. Like, people were like, what? You can't do that?
Why would you do? Well, you know why? Because he was worth it. He was worth every dime of it. Okay? And what happens is you get what you pay for, especially in 2015. If you look, that's not to say that I'm going to turn anyone away from this sport, okay? Because the truth of the matter is there are some people that just can't afford to come to my club. And if those people are listening, come to my club. We will make it work, okay? But for people that can afford to come to a wrestling club like mine or anyone else's, okay, you shouldn't complain about the price, okay? Because the fact is we're better than most rec coaches. The club coaches are better than your high school coaches. Not because, and that's not me being arrogant, that's me looking at statistics, okay? We, number one, get to spend more time, especially in the state of New Jersey, right? Let's just talk about Jersey in and of itself, okay? The coaches at a high school level are only allowed to spend the day after Thanksgiving through the state tournament with their kids, okay? And then they get like a month and a half or 2 months in the summer that they're allowed to train and have hands on their kids, okay? Just because of reps, I get to see your kids more, okay? I'm training them more often than you are. So if you take that into account, number one, then we're getting better results because I got my hands on the kids more. Now you take that, combine it with the fact that I do this full time. This is my profession. I don't have to worry about doing lesson plans for my history class that I don't really give a shit about. I don't have to worry about another. I got to worry about wrestling. My sole meaning in life is to train athletes, and it's hard to compete with that. I mean, look, let's be honest, man. You don't go to a part-time dentist, do you? No, you go to a full-time dentist. You don't want a guy that goes, yeah, I do plumbing on the side, but I fix teeth every once in a while too. You know what I mean?
I've never quite heard it put in such a manner, but as I'm looking at my teeth right now, I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess you got a point there with the dentist part, but
yeah.
Now, one thing I want to jump on back is we haven't touched on it yet. We've kind of alluded to it. Is the whole concept of that Vice Sports story, which is about these lock-ins, and as I was reading this story, and here's the things that jump out. It said, so you got the idea after competing in this 70-hour death race. I guess people know that these Spartan races and these Tough Mudders, they're becoming kind of like the Weekend Warrior type of thing. I mean, where it's like for those that don't really want to do CrossFit and want to do something more challenging, there's these things like the death race. What was that thing? I mean, it says it was
death race is very different, man. The guy Joe DeCina that started the Spartan races did not start with Spartan races. He had to dumb down the death race to make the Spartan race. Death race is anywhere between 40, because you don't know how long it is. Okay, like they'll tell you there's a start time, but they don't tell you when you're going to be done. You got to take a week off of work. It was between me, you, and everyone else listening here, it was the worst experience of my life. It absolutely broke my mind, body, and spirit. And in a positive way where I can learn from it. They start messing with you 6 months out, man. They start sending you emails in different languages, about the start time and about stuff like that. So they start messing with you really, really quick. So when you get there, they say registration starts at noon, and then there's like a 2 p.m. parachute packing class that you should probably be at, right? And like, well, you're thinking to yourself, it's not a mandatory thing, but you think, I don't know how to pack a parachute. Do you know how to pack a parachute? You're looking around, you're like, holy cow, man, I don't know anything about packing a parachute. Why do we need to know how to pack a parachute? So you go to the 2 p.m. class, and of course there's no one there. So they just start messing with you right away. And then when the race starts, they made us literally, and I'm not exaggerating, pick up rocks over our head for 7 hours straight. We would basically just pick up a rock, put it over our head, put it down, step to the right, pick up the next rock, put it over our head, put it down. And that went on for, no exaggeration, 6 to 7 hours. And then, they put us in 50-degree water upstream. You have to walk upstream, hip depth water, about 2 or 3 miles, and then chop wood and carry the stumps 2 miles up a hill. And then they got like a Bible verse written on a tree that you have to remember and tell the guy at the bottom of the hill. And if you get one word wrong, you got to go back up the hill. I mean, it was absolutely brutal. And so it broke me. My body actually gave out. And I realized, and like, there are certain points in my life that are turning points, and that was definitely one of them. I really started to focus more on nutrition in my life at that point, because throughout, I think I made it about 30 out of the hours there. And I think the entire time I had one Cliff Bar and a Pop-Tart. So my body just failed on me. And so I started taking nutrition a lot more seriously. And when I started to take nutrition more seriously, I started to ask the people that finished and won the death race how they were training and what they were eating during the race and what they ate before the race and what they would eat after. And because I was talking to them, I just wanted to kind of get an idea of how they were training. And I spoke to the guy that won the death race that year, and his name was Joe Decker. And he's actually in the Guinness Book for being the fittest man in the world. He did some insane feat in 24 hours, like, a bunch of biking and running and all that kind of stuff. But he said one of the ways that he would train for races like Badwater, which is 135 miles through the Mojave Desert, he would run a mile every hour on the hour for 24 hours. And so that kind of piqued my interest, and I go, oh, well, maybe we could do that with wrestling, And then I thought, well, you can't really wrestle 24 matches in 24 hours. Somebody would die, So then the way the lock-in started, man, was, I just, instead of wrestling a match every hour, I just started putting together, full body workouts every hour. And we did that. And the first one was about 4 years ago, I think. And we had 20 kids sign up for it. And when I put it up on my website, I told my wife, we were camping, when I put it up on the website, I said, nobody's going to sign up for this shit. Nobody's crazy enough to do this with me. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, 3 kids signed up on the website. And we kind of haven't looked back since, I guess,
Yeah, obviously there's got to be all sorts of releases and whatnot. And you can't just be a guy off the street. You got to be probably, what benchmarks do they kind of have to hit to be like, all right, you're good with this? Because if I tried to do this like off the street.
No, you would be fine. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. And I don't mean that as, I'm not putting on my coach's hat and say, you can do it. No, really, you can do it, because you can't train for one. You can't train for a lock-in, man. You can't. Okay, because every time you think you're in good shape, these things kick you right in the teeth. You're going to find a workout that absolutely breaks you. So to answer your question, there is no benchmark. There is no starting point. It's basically, I tell people, if you're not in shape, you better do a lock-in, because that'll jumpstart your fitness program. It's why put a toe in the water, man? Let's jump the in. So. Oops, sorry, I dropped an F-bomb. That's my bad.
So you've just when you're going through this Vice, the guy Aaron Gordon sitting there going through these workouts and he's watching it. You just said at the beginning of the show that you're kind of worried about how this would come off, and obviously I've watched some of the Periscope, of the workouts, the general club workouts. But at what point did you just basically forget he was there and just said, all right, you knew he was there the whole time, huh?
I was very cognizant of his whereabouts the entire time, man. I wanted him to have a good experience, and by good experience, I mean we really wanted to kind of, make sure that he was challenged but not defeated. And I think as wrestlers, we forget how mentally strong we can be compared to other people, because I saw him, he gave up during those guerrilla runs, man. And not that he, look, I'm not, I don't mean to detract from him as a person. He just didn't know how to deal with such levels of intense discomfort on a constant basis. I mean, I think he could have muscled through one or two more, but I don't think his body's ever been through that. And it was such uncharted territory that his body just started to kind of fail on him. Not unlike mine did when I was in that death race, So, I mean, I don't mean to detract from him as a person. I just think I can remember him doing that workout. And he did actually do one or two more after that. But he had mentally checked out at that point. He was just looking for an out, and he was staring at me. I'll never forget, man. He was doing gorilla runs, which is like basically think of a bear crawl with a 45-pound plate. Okay. And he was looking at me as if to say, please just tell me to stop. Please just, and I wouldn't do it. I was just trying to coax him through the situation. And he just, he started crying, and it was uncomfortable, man. It was weird, and I felt bad. I tried to coax him through it as best I could, and tried to, put on my coach's hat. But he had enough at that point.
Now, how did he find out about this? I mean, where was the lead? I mean, how did you get the call on this? He emailed me through my website.
While I was at Flow Nationals this year, man. He was just like, hey, we'd really love to cover one of your 24-hour lock-ins. I think it's crazy. I think you guys are nuts. I think I want to do it. I'm like, are you sure, dude? I don't know much about you, but, if you're ready to do it, I'm ready to coach you, man. I'm excited. So he actually it was him and one of his colleagues, a woman named Christine, who absolutely destroyed it. She was a former gymnast, and she anything body weight, man, she just destroyed. She had some trouble with like throwing the medicine balls and stuff like that, but man, she wasn't the first in every single workout, but man, she absolutely destroyed it. And tougher than hell. You could see her, she was in pain, but it was impressive to watch a young lady like that really grit through some really uncomfortable stuff. And not to mention the fact that, I give people, because we do have other types of athletes doing these things. It's not just wrestlers. So I give them the option. Look, you can wrestle when we wrestle if you want to, or you can do burpees for 7 minutes while the guys wrestle a match. And, initially they say, well, I'd rather do burpees, until they actually had to do the friggin' burpees, and that sucks just as bad. So they were like, well, forget it. We'll wrestle instead. And so, I got Aaron out there in a stance, and I wrestled him for 7 minutes. And then I got Christine, I think her name was Christine, out there in a stance, and I wrestled her for 7 minutes. They did fine, man. They did fine. It was just, nobody's going to hurt them. It's just, they learned to do something new, man. So yeah, it was really cool. The way they muscled through everything,
Now, speaking back on the Rhino Wrestling Club, again at rhinowrestlingclub.com, there's a section of your website that's the FAQs, and you've got 4 different videos, and I just want to get a little bit more of a detailed analysis on some of that from a wrestling coach's perspective, mainly as it revolves in the wrestling camp. The first video, of course, you can go watch these at rhinowrestlingclub.com/FAQs. And the first one up there is it better to attend a wrestling club with large numbers or a club with smaller groups? And this is kind of, I guess, where you've got now 4 different club sites around the country. And I'm guessing that it starts with a little club, then it grows big, and then, all right, we got to create another small club. So
that's right.
Where have you found to be the hunting hole when it comes to numbers?
I can't have more than a 10-to-1 ratio. I absolutely can't. I think it's counterproductive. If I have more than a 10-to-1 ratio, one of my athletes is losing out, and that's not fair. So what you see is, I call them puppy mills. There's a bunch of wrestling clubs in New Jersey, man, and they're selling the puppy mill thing. I mean, if you want your kid to be the best 10-year-old in the country, then yeah, you should probably bring them to a room that has 40 hammers there okay, and they're all teaching, headlocks and roll through cradles and jump moves, okay, yes, you should absolutely do that. But if your goal is higher than high school, like if you can see yourself wrestling past high school, whatever that might mean to you, I think we need to change that, and that's probably a story for another time. But we need to change the concept of what it means to wrestle after high school anyway. Because I have senior level athletes that weren't that great at college wrestlers that I really truly believe can make some noise on the freestyle circuit. So but if you have the aspirations either as an athlete or as a parent for your child to wrestle and get a scholarship to school, or wrestle at the Olympic level, or wrestle at the world level, well, then I really believe that you need to have a smaller group setting. You really do. It's not conducive to learning. Okay, to have 50 kids in a room, and that's another reason why we open 5 days a week, man. I could very easily jump my numbers up simply by cutting. I could cut out 2 days a week of work, okay, and then I could have twice as many kids in the classes, and I would make more money because people are more attracted to big rooms than they are small class settings. And then all of a sudden, the numbers of actual wrestlers would go down. Meaning the kids that I look at as, these are wrestlers. These aren't just good athletes that happen to be good at this sport. These are wrestlers. These are kids that can transcend the sport. These are kids that can go from technique to technique to technique to technique and wrestle. Not just, great athletes that can, whip a headlock off, once in a while. So, yeah, I think 10-1 is kind of the honeypot there,
One thing you did mention that did kind of made my ears perk up is, you'd said something about if the parent wants their kid to be the best 10-year-old in the country. I think some of that right there, I mean, let's kind of shift gears on that line there is, I guess I come from the theory that I don't think we need these these tournaments are moneymakers, yeah, and people talk about mat time and whatnot, but do we need a 7-year-old national championship? I don't think so. No. I think schoolboys is probably where you could start, because at that time, 13, 14, you're like, all right, this is where the kid kind of makes their own decisions in terms of what sport they like, but at age points, I mean, you talk about, you have the video on what age should your child start strength training, but at what point do you think private training or clubs is the way to go? Because, I mean, I think more kids should be playing as many different sports as possible to stay active, obviously, with everything, all these, get them away from the video games. You know what? I have a PlayStation 2 that I bought in 2004. I haven't played it in about 5 years. That's a 2. That's a 2. I didn't even have the 3. I'm trying to get the 4, but now with all the phones and whatnot, I mean, athletic competition, so where do you talk to, what is it, the conversation like with a parent that comes in with maybe a 10-year-old that's, you can see he's got some talent and ability and some athleticism, but you know what, it might be too early. I mean, have you ever, basically said, hey, give this a break, come back in a year or two when you think these are ready? Or what's your theory on, how soon we should start competing? I mean, what levels? I mean, should we go to national tournaments?
Yeah. Okay, the competition one is for me the conversation that becomes a little bit more in depth. Look, I'm not going to turn a kid away. If the kid wants to wrestle, then he can wrestle at my place. All right, but I do encourage anyone before high school to play as many sports as you possibly can. That said, I don't believe that. I think you should be playing all sports all year round if it's available to you. I mean, if you play wrestling, if you play soccer and you wrestle and you do whatever, you should be doing soccer 2 nights a week, wrestling 1 night a week, whatever. So you can kind of script your own training regimen. So I don't really mind that too much. I think the biggest problem that we've run into with the burnout stuff is over competing these kids at a young age, for sure. And to me there are 3 factors that kind of contribute to kids losing interest in the sport or even just their bodies kind of crapping out. And number 1, it's weight cutting. I think we as a culture need to get away from cutting weight completely. And you know, I have ideas on how we can do it, but there's no money involved in that, so the NCAA is not going to allow it. But you know, so there's that. There's crazy parents, and then there's over competition. You know, if a parent is too much coach and not enough loving parent, you know, a kid is going to lose interest pretty darn quick. They're going to try and find their own identity in something else. So, you know, I think that too much competition, especially putting too much emphasis on any one competition, like you said, like a national tournament, the fact that there's 7-year-old national champions is quite silly to me, and it's cute. You know, I mean, it's cute to see the kids that have trophies bigger than themselves, or you know, wearing belts that they can't fit, you know, into like big, you know, championship belts that they've won and stuff like that. It's cute to see it, but it kind of, by the time the kid gets to college and you dangle that carrot in front of his face that is the NCAA title, he goes, well, shit, I've got 6 national titles, and this one seems a whole lot harder to win than the other 6 that I've won, so why would I bother doing that? You know, and then they drop out of school, or not, maybe they don't drop out of school, but they stop wrestling in college, you know? So, man, it gets frustrating to me. If it were up to me, my 8th grade and under would only wrestle 6-7 times a year. You know, they would only compete 6 or 7 times a year. They'd probably, you know, they'd train all year round, and we'd just kind of peak for certain events and then kind of taper off, you know?
Yeah, my theory is, again, I'm not a wrestling coach by any means. I do hold a coach's card, and I did do some coaching with my club back home after I graduated college. But when I look at it and I think about my own experiences, you know, I entered my first wrestling tournament when I was 16 years old after 2 practices. No.
That's not a good idea.
No, it's not. It wasn't. Let me tell you, it wasn't a good idea, because the guy I wrestled was a state runner-up who came to the tournament looking for our starter. And because it was the only guy in the area he hadn't beaten, and that starter was a 3 or 4 time regional champion and made the state finals. You know, he was ahead of me. I was a hack when it came to the actual wrestling part of it. But you know, I think about it, and then I went after that. I didn't wrestle again in a competition until, you know, the high school season, and it was like I spent all this time practicing. You know, granted, I was an upperweight. My coach was a lightweight, and he kind of taught us how to wrestle like little guys. So here I'm trying to perfect the inside step series, and you know, it got to the point by the end of my wrestling career, as bad as it was, I at least knew how to hit that move. I mean, I could hit that. Right. Granted, at the heavyweights, I had to work with a little guy, a smaller guy, to be able to hit it. But because I'm not going underneath a 280-pound kid, that was a mistake too. Choice. No, my neck still. Maybe that's why my neck hurts. But I'm thinking more practice, because, and this is where I became a proponent of freestyling Greco too. Is if you've got a kid that's a great cradler, and he's hitting that cradle in every match he's ever hit, and then he goes into college, and all of a sudden, these guys know how to keep their head up. They're not putting their head to their knee in the referee's position. So, you know, the freestyle, you're learning to finish shots and things like that. And I just think practice, where constant drilling and getting it, because if you drill a move 100 times wrong, guess what? In a match, you're going to be hitting it wrong. So, is that your theory on more practice when you talk about training? Or is it drilling? Or
I think we kind of these kids need to embrace the practice room environment, man. I mean, and you know, I mean, that's coming from, you know, that sounds very self-serving. I fully understand that. I'm a club coach. Go to more clubs, train more. Yeah, okay, I understand that. But it's truly what I believe. I think the best way to kind of take in this sport is through, you know, things like play wrestling, right? Like Kale's a big proponent of it, right? Those kids, man, I've been in that room, and they don't even warm up. Hey, just go play around, go play. You know, play wrestling is so important for these kids, man. Yeah, drilling is definitely one thing, but I think a lot of the kids get that the reps that they need to get at a high school level, right? I look at my room more as a laboratory than I do a practice room. Okay, I need you to come in and tinker with a position, or tinker, and I'll use that word too to kind of, you know, put them in the right mindset of, okay, well, look, man, you might do this technique one way because you're 5'2" and 30 or 140 pounds. But the guy that is 134 or 130 or 140 pounds, that's 5'9", is going to have slightly different mechanics on the technique. So you have to come in there and feel your way through these positions, okay? And that's why I kind of think of it as, well, let's kind of tinker with these positions. It's a malleable state that we're in. It's not such a rigid high crotch double, blast double, low single, sweep single. I'm not going to bark at you what technique to hit. Well, maybe I will on certain nights, but for the most part, if we're learning, man, it has to kind of be a malleable state. It has to be pliable. You need to be able to kind of bend with what you're teaching and who you're teaching it to and how they're receiving the information and what type of athlete they are, what type of athletic ability they have, what type of personality they have. That goes into a wrestling style. If you're just a super aggressive kid, well, guess what? You're going to have a super aggressive style. That's not to say that a shy, more timid kid can't, become a successful wrestler. So, when I say they need to be training more, I think they need to go a little bit beyond the basic, drilling 500 high crotches to a double a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that actually kind of leads into the whole learning aspect you just mentioned. Yeah. Learning. I'm curious about your background in terms of who do you look at as maybe the biggest inspiration on how you've learned to train people? I mean, which is it a coach from your youth or college? I mean, is there somebody that you point to and be like, I learned to do things the way I do because I learned a certain skill or task underneath a certain coach?
Yeah, well, yes, 100%. And to answer your question, I have been so fortunate, Jason. I've been really, really fortunate with the amount of awesome just people that I've been able to come across in my life. John Smith, like everyone knows about, right? Everyone knows that John Smith is one of the greatest coaches in the world right now, okay? And the truth of the matter is, I got a lot from him. I learned a tremendous amount. I was only at OSU from 1997, 1998, or 96 to 97, I'm sorry. Okay, so just to kind of spend some time with him there. And then once I kind of got out of college and started coming back around the sport, I reached out to John and he let me work some camps for him and stuff like that. And I didn't even care about how much he was paying me. I just wanted to kind of soak up the wrestling knowledge. So yeah, I picked up a ton from him. And then, the Nisavachi, who was my high school wrestling coach, he was such an inspiration in that whole tinkering thing, right? Like he would come in, and I can distinctly remember being in the bathroom in the coach's office and him pounding on the door. He just walked into the coach's office, and I'm like, "What's the matter?" He's like, "Come on, hurry up. We got to go practice this one thing. I was thinking about it last night, and we got to find out a different way to finish that single leg that you're in." So he was always so creative with his technique. And I think I get a lot of the creativity that I use during coaching from him. And then, my youth coach was a guy named Brian Hoffmeister, who was 30. He was probably as old as I am now, and he was still waking up before work to take me running bleachers. So he wasn't just sitting there holding a whistle. He was doing those bleachers with me. So when I'm doing hill sprints, with the kids, they look at it like, okay, coach is into this, man. This is a lifestyle. This is not something that he's barking at me. This is something that he lives. He embodies. He puts himself through this. This isn't just something that's okay for athletes to do. This is something that, everyone's doing, So I'm swinging a kettlebell with these kids, and I do a lock-in a year. My day's coming soon. I'm doing one in August. So, it's. I think I've been really fortunate to be blessed with a lot of great coaches around me, and I've stolen from all of them. Lately I've been going up to the Penn State room, and so a lot of my coaching style is kind of, leaning towards Kale and being a little bit more of the silent assassin and kind of, making sure that every word has a specific and very weighted gravity to it. You know, if you hear Kale talk, and I know you've talked to him before, every word that comes out of his mouth has a lot of meaning behind it, you know? It's not like he's just blabbering on like I am right now.
You talk about college. This is the last question I want to do because I know you're in between camps. You got to get to it. But, you know, there was a discussion I had on the most recent episode, or one of the most recent episodes, a short time, where I was talking with Matt Lowers and Joe Norton about Knox College. And, you know, Joe, being from Illinois, had this kind of an issue with some of the parents and coaches within Illinois about, you know, looking at Division I as the only kind of avenue for their kids. When you've got high school age kids that are ready to go to college, and, you know, obviously there's the discussion with their high school coach and their parents, but, you know, how much are you looking at them to tell them to go, hey, you know, there's plenty of Division I opportunities, but are you selling them on the Division II angle, the Division III, the NAIA? I mean, where do you push your kids to?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, again, you have to kind of take everything into account, right? What type of a kid is he? Because if he's not going to thrive in a situation where he's thrown headlong into a fire, man, being at a Division I level might not be for them. I'll give you a perfect example. A kid that I train, his name is Sean Glasgow. He basically, you know, he was talking to Kevin Jackson at Iowa State. He was talking to, you know, a couple of other Division I coaches, and they offered him some money. Not, you know, they weren't giving him a lot, but, you know, they were giving him some money. He certainly had some money on the table. And Chadron State out in Nebraska offered him pretty much everything, right? Well, I said, you're an absolute fool if you don't go there. Why? Because you maybe can wrestle in the Big 12, or maybe not, because you're probably going to get frustrated because you don't like, you know. So if a kid isn't completely enamored and completely infatuated with the sport, they're going to have a really hard time at a Division I level, man. They really are. You know, some of these kids use wrestling as a way to pay for school. And you know what, man? That's okay. That's quite all right. And if, you know, if that kid is going to have more success at a Division II or an NAIA level, then go there. You know, and then there's the other end of the spectrum, a kid that probably loves the sport more than anyone else in the world, but they're just not that talented. They're going to get their heads kicked in at Division I level. Well, those kids need a place to wrestle too. And I think those places, you know, like a junior college program or a NAIA school or a Division III school, man, those are perfect places for these kids to wrestle. Shit, even a club, you know, a NWCA club, you know, those are great places for these kids to wrestle. So the fact is that it doesn't just have to be at Division I level anymore.
Talking with Mike Malinconico, the man behind the Rhino Wrestling Club at rhinowrestlingclub.com. Follow him on Twitter at Rhino Wrestling. You'll see some interesting Periscope videos. Check out the website for more information on it, about these lock-ins. Of course, the Vice story on Vice Sports. You can find the quick link at mattalkonline.com/rhino. So, Mike, closing seconds here. What do we got? Just anything open forum for you to just kind of rant on.
No, I got to get going here. We're about to start session. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for talking to me.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is brought to you by Flips Wrestling. Share your attitude and be heard at flipswrestling.com. Like what you hear on Short Time? Drop us a rating and a review on iTunes by going to mattalkonline.com/getshorttime.